As we are beginning to reimagine India, one of the things that is extremely critical is to look at what is the social fabric on which we are building. And when you are talking about social fabric, there has been a long standing debate. How do we strengthen the social fabric? A fabric that can stand the wrath of trying to tear people away, tear communities away, put communities against one another. And this has been going on for a while, we have seen, especially in the last 10 years, this has taken a new turn. And I think we are back here looking at how do we imagine a country, my country, India, so that we can leave a generation which can live cohesively. We all know that at this time, there is such a lot of diversity in the country. There has been so many areas of conflict. And we've had several political, religious, social fissures that we've had to address. And despite all the challenges during the time of the independence, we tried to bring in a tremendous effort of having a constitution which can really address some of the fissures that has been very important at that time, which are still continuing to be important. And that constitution is still the binding figure as we see it today. But again, what has been two aspects that we'll have to look at, I think, from the social fabric today that we are talking about. A kind of a way in which we need to hurry and said we will have this freedom and this freedom at any cost. So let us first settle for the political freedom. And so a lot of effort has been looking at how do we get the colonial people out, how do we manage ourselves, how do we govern ourselves, what kind of policies do we have. But then Baba Saheb Ambedkar at that time warned that when you are building this political freedom and the structure, don't we have to look at the social freedom, the social liberty, the kind of structures that have rooted in all our lives at that time, especially the factors of caste and the way it has divided people and people. It has divided workers, it has divided communities, it has divided schools, it has divided workplaces. Is it not important for us to build a society in which we can look at the social freedom and then simultaneously bring the whole aspect of the political freedom? And we have seen how history during those 15 years, maybe towards the last maybe 4 or 5 years, where there was a political conference which was really trying to say, let us have home rule. So we have built on the freedom, our freedom struggle, primarily on the political aspects of this country, political governance. And there has been a conscientious negligence of social freedoms that need to have been addressed. Today, after 70 years, we are still facing the implications of those. And this has been also been brought out very clearly by Dr. Ambedkar when he said that the foundations on which we are building the political freedom, as we are saying, one person, one vote, is it going to be implemented in the way that it's supposed to be? Or the people who have been thus far excluded, who have been discriminated, who have been segregated, whose rights have not been heard at all, are we able to give freedom to them? Or is it going just to be replaced by another white person or another Indian dominant caste who are going to be worse than the earlier systems of colonial that we have looked at. So caste discrimination, which is one of the oldest and the most rigid form of social hierarchies which are existing in this country all these years, which, as we all know, based on birth, despite the constitutional safeguards and special legislation for the protection of the country's 201 million scheduled castes, the violations of their fundamental rights continue on a massive scale. I don't think I need to go into the details of how the whole aspect of multiple forms of discrimination which have this underlying purity pollution are continuing everywhere. The inequality is going rampant. The hierarchical setup has been alienated. A certain section of the society from the mainstream and has assigned them a lower position based on that. And we know that these are affecting social, economic, cultural, political deprivation of all forms. And whenever, even today, they challenge these forms, we know the ghastly violence that is unleashed against these communities. On the other hand, there is a denial of existence of this caste-based discrimination, which is making this whole thing worse. If you ask any urban Indian, they say, no, it has been eliminated long time, or it may be it's somewhere else. It is maybe existing somewhere in Bihar, it doesn't exist here. Or Gandhiji or somebody has abolished the whole thing. So the modern India, even today, denies the existence. So you have two Indias, or maybe several others, but one of these is two Indias where the system of exclusion is still continuing despite the several measures that have been brought in. The whole aspect of urbanization, globalization, modernization that has swept our country and has trying to see that there is a climate of meritocracy which recognizes and rewards this merit, quote unquote, is still again entrenched with caste-based discriminations. We still come across several perplexing acts of violence where perpetrators are completely scot-free and the impunity is still exists. So caste today has proved itself as prevalent, and it will not yield to any law or any policy that we are bringing in, whether it is in any area. And it has pervaded. It has been repressed and pervaded. As development grows, the caste discrimination also has gone in. Earlier, there was discrimination primarily when you say, you are prohibited from walking on the streets, you are prohibited from wearing chappals, you are prohibited from wearing a certain type of clothing, you are prohibited from, of course, marrying anybody even if they both have a consent. And now we see that in all these areas, whether it is health, whether it's employment, whether it's entrepreneurship, markets, both rural markets, urban markets, real estate, housing, corporates, infrastructure. We've done a study on infrastructure. Where are the symbols of infrastructure located? And in 88% of the cases, whether it's bank, whether it's a post office, whether it's the police, whether it's the fire station, whether it's any civic community, the critical infrastructure for the well-being of the communities are all located where the dominant castes live. And even though it's not that the scheduled castes are not being contributing to the treasury, we know India has a very regressive caste tax system which has indirect taxes. So the proportion of the money that is going into the coffers of a country, of a whole tax system, a large proportion of that is coming from those of the excluded communities. Those of us who are able to afford an auditor, we are able to evade the taxes. But those indirect taxes, for any item that you purchase, roti, kapada, makan, they are all being taxed in such a way. So the contribution to the coffers, to the treasury, to the national wealth is being created also by the scheduled caste, the Dalits, the excluded. But the returns that they are getting, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's health, whether it's employment, whether it's any of the civic amenities, it's very, very little. It's not only there. You look at the disasters. When you look at the disasters, where are they located? The people who are affected, the most vulnerable locations where the disasters occur, are also the places which are inhabited by the excluded communities. So there is a kind of an inbuilt structural discrimination and a very systemic discrimination which systematically has excluded, despite the fact that there are several provisions. I don't want to get into a lot of statistics, but just to say in education, you see Dalits are lagging behind the dominant caste. I am not using the so-called upper caste and the lower caste because of a language that we'll have to change. So dominant caste and the Dalit caste is a language I feel that we need to use. The whole concept of purity pollution is very much present in the citadels of our education. Even much before Rohit Vemula and much later after Rohit Vemula, we've seen in almost all the universities and institutions of higher education, there has been a virulent practice of discrimination, not just by the students, not just by the staff, but they're also teaching in the way the people are assigned topics or assigned guides or assigned the doctoral projects, postdoctoral projects. And because of that, the utter exclusion that these communities are faced is very clear in education. Recently, the statistics that were done by genres in several states, especially from Jharkhand and other places, show the extreme amount of dropout rate among the scheduled castes, especially because of COVID in the last 1.5 years, is shocking. There are almost, they say, around more than 66% of the Dalit children have dropped out or forced out of these institutions. Some of them, I know personally, have been forced into manual labor. And they are lawyers, some of them are doctoral students, but because of the situation, they are also being forced out. This is the same thing with health. Because of the location, you also see that there is the incidence of ill health is much more. And then on the other side, the well-being and access to hospitals is also very much limited. And so you look at the discrimination that has been reported as per the National Family Health Survey for a greater proportion of SCs, 39.1% are underweight compared to all the groups. So even at the time of children below 5 years, because of the fact of their location of birth, they are forced into undernourishment, and therefore the maternal health indicators are very low. The SC women and then the children and as adults, all of them face much greater incidence of ill health and therefore are not able to compete on par. Whether you look at housing, it's the same. The segregation among the housing still continues. The whole aspects, whether it is urban, whether it is rural, in urban areas it's much more distinct. Wherever you see a dumping, a major dump area, wherever you see the railway tracks, wherever you see there is a low-lying areas, Wherever you see a very huge industrial dump areas, the Dalit communities, the SC communities are located there. If they have been occupying and living in those areas for years and years, and we have seen there has been a systemic demolition and displacement of still continues. I can go on. The labor market, exclusion and discrimination is visible not only in the civic and political spheres, but also in the economic arena, particularly in terms of occupation, labor employment, market arrangements. Studies have shown if a Dalit family produces milk, the chances are their milk is undervalued, if not discriminated in purchase. Dalits are often restricted to different kinds of occupations that are often considered polluted. And this is very, very clear. The whole aspect of manual scavenging is deplorable even today. 1.2 million officially declared manual scavengers are there, and we have seen huge number of people who are still having sewer deaths, poisonous death. They are dying of gas chambers. The manual scavenging, the Safai Karmachari Andolan has come out with a clear number of deaths as to say you are sending Dalits, especially those who are involved in manual scavenging, as gas chambers, and their death because they are forced into these sewers when you have technology that you can use. Land is still an issue. A vast majority of Dalit communities are still living in rural areas who have no access to land. The livelihood is a problem, the housing is a problem, and whenever there is either a drought or a flood, then they are the ones who are most affected. And the whole land market, even if there is a way in which either from the state's resources or from the personal private resources, one cannot enter into the land market because it is not open, and only if you are a particular caste you are able to buy even today. And there is a structural discrimination in the allocation of budgets, and lot of studies have come. We ourselves have done a lot of studies that even today only 20% of the money that is allocated, the so-called, earlier it used to be called special component plan, now they are calling it welfare schemes for the scheduled caste and welfare schemes for the scheduled tribes. These allocations are notional in the sense on paper you will see that they are for scheduled caste or for scheduled tribes, but the purpose for which they are being used is for airports, for building 6-way lane, for giving electricity subsidy. So the money that should go for individual welfare or development or entrepreneurial aspect for the scheduled caste is completely diverted. In some cases they are even buying bullets. In some cases they are building helipads. Delhi government at one point started distributing laddu for the Diwali with the money that is supposed to be given. So this kind of a systemic exclusion, a default exclusion that exists whenever and wherever the communities are concerned and wherever they are developing, whether it's education, whether they are attempting to access health, whether to access some kind of an entrepreneurship or even access to justice. There is a law, Prevention of Atrocities Act. There has been an amendment, but we also know when I go to the Thane, I will not be able to register a case under the Scheduled Caste, Scheduled Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act. They may register a case, but they will not cite it as a crime that has been committed against the scheduled caste. So this kind of a very, very, very systemic aspects in which the policies that have been meant, the policies that have been awarded during the time of the independence onwards, whether it's for bridging the development gap between the excluded communities and rest of the communities, instead of bringing the gap closer, the chasm is being widened day by day. What do we do? What do we do? I think this is a very, very critical aspect that we'll have to look at it. Caste as a concept has posed a great challenge to the community, both due to its origin and its implications. The whole aspect of the fact that it is been built on a clearly religious values. Of course, it started with the Hindutva originally, and it still continues very virulently. The Brahminical systems which have been brought in, I think they are still have spread, whether it's Christianity, whether it is Buddhism, whether it's Islam, whether it is Sikh. In many cases, we have seen separate Gurudwaras that are still being present, separate pews in the churches, separate cemeteries in some places, the burial grounds where Christians will not bury because the persons are from the thing. So, the aspect to say that it is in one religion, definitely I think the basis is still there, but the concept of social exclusion and the hierarchy that is present is virulently being spread through the deep religious beliefs, the beliefs that it is somewhere necessary for us to keep these communities separate. We may be polluted. Of course, it has economic benefits. So, it's not just a kind of a religious space. So, what do we do? I think the founders of a country have seen that the constitutional provisions have been very clearly brought in, and that we don't have to delve much, because the whole Article 17, Article 15, which guarantees non-discrimination on the basis of caste, the Article 21, which affirms life and security, Article 46 specifically protects Dalits from social injustice, all these, and also Article 16, which says that specifically grants the states for reservation of seats for the underprivileged, the whole aspect of reservation, are there in place. Of course, now there is a move to remove this kind of a reservation that is supposed to be implemented. Of course, the way it is being implemented is still such a large lacuna, but already there is a backlash saying that because of reservation, the merit is being compromised, which is another myth. So, apart from the whole aspect of constitutional measures, there have been several legislative measures and administrative mechanisms to ensure this caste-based discrimination is sufficiently captured. So, you have the Prevention of Atrocities, and before that the Civil Protection of Civil Rights Acts, and much before that the Elimination of Untouchability Offences Act have been there. After that, there are certain other aspects which have come: the elimination of the manual scavenging, prohibition of building of the latrines, the whole bonded labor prohibition, child labor prohibition. Some of these have very clearly been brought in, and not only that, in a few states, even a very critical act which looks at allocation of budgets, separate budgets for the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, have also been brought in. Of course, here we will have to still address the issue of gatekeepers, those who are resourcing the important positions as administrators, as commission chairs, as the members of the commission, as representatives of assembly or the Lok Sabha, and many of them definitely are also from the scheduled caste, whether it's the scheduled caste, whether the scheduled or the dominant caste. The gatekeepers, the people who are resourcing and implementing these, have become an issue, and therefore the implementation of this, the registration of the cases, the conviction in the courts is still very low. The appeals that need to be taken up, the district monitoring and vigilance committees that need to look at and track the atrocities, the centers for the study of exclusion and inclusive policies which have been brought in several of these universities, those have sufficiently not been implemented. So you have a constitutional provision, you have legislative mechanisms, but the implementation of it, and even more, the accountability systems, the grievance redressal mechanisms, the support to community leaders in accessing many of these mechanisms have not sufficiently been put in. So what is the kind of an India that we are reimagining? Yes, the broad infrastructure is there. Yes, there are sufficient or the necessary policies initially which have been put and have been little amended are still there, but the will and the institutional political will and the gatekeepers who are ensuring, who we need to ensure that these are implemented, there is a huge amount of lacunae that it is there. I think this is one key area that we will have to look at. How can the communities, and especially the community, the agency of the scheduled castes, agency of the Dalits and Adivasis, other marginalized communities, need to be, how do we bring the agency and strengthen the agency? So it is not a savior who is going to come and ensure that these things are implemented or somehow saved, but that the strength and the mobilization takes place. I think that is a major area which is a lacunae. As we once again revision the India that we want, yes, there are certain mechanisms and definitely these are very effective policies that are there, the necessary policies are there. But do you have a social equity policy? Not just as a reservation which gives a quota system, okay, that's something that we'll have to strengthen, but a necessary social equity policy which looks at values, sustaining belief and making sure that the inclusion of these communities at all levels, like for example, in the corporate areas, because when we look at employment, even today, most of the employment that is there, I think more than 80% of the employment is not in the public sector. It is almost in the private sector. And among that, the informal sector is the one which is even more larger. So where the kind of policies that we need in recruitment, in workplace and in supply chain, do we have a social equity, non-discrimination policy that is effective in place and that can be implemented? Is there a diversity? There was, I think, sometime an attempt at bringing a diversity bill. It has been drafted and now I think it is still being done. Do we have a sufficient strong diversity policy? What about the virulent higher education discrimination that is taking place, or even in educational institutions that is taking place? There is no policy. We need to bring the policy. And then how do we look at the entrenched social equity which has come into organizational culture, which requires deliberate work every single day? Because without that kind of an organizational culture, there is a discrimination workplace. The person who comes to the mind, even now in many schools, when they want to clean, you only look at the Dalit children or the parents of the Dalit children when there is a carcass, when there is a major cleaning that needs to be done. You still have very clear ways in which the segregation, exclusion and therefore discrimination and violation of basic fundamental rights are still taking place, and that has not been sufficiently captured. We have to have a very serious undoing untouchability and caste in this country, and which we really need to develop this. How do we undo untouchability? How do we undo the casteism that has come into the mindset of all. So here I think we'll have to look into both the internal and the external. I think the internal, we have very clearly realized we need an undoing internalized casteist suppression and casteist supremacy and casteist inferiority. So, because of these ages of this discrimination, you are forcing certain communities to internally take up and accept the forced inferiorities, and therefore it becomes very difficult for a person to come out. And by default you have internalized supremacy, caste supremacy that rules even very subtly. So, therefore, very difficult to ensure. So, how do we get communities to talk about it? How do we have a way in which truth and reconciliation is a way in which we can bring? You cannot annihilate communities, of course you can annihilate these beliefs, but how do you make sure that we are able to talk and discuss and bring a kind of a clear reparation for all the aspects that the communities have gone on. I think that very clear dialogue has not started and debate has not. And it is not just a very esoteric phenomena. It has been tried in South Africa, it has been tried in several of the countries where racism exists. Of course, it is still virulent. We have seen the whole aspect of George Floyd still being, but still there is an open discussion on the way the journey of racism that is taking place in those societies. There is no such debate or discourse or even a policy to enhance the kind of discussions to look at the internalized casteist values that are present in all workplaces. Look at the language. Do we have a way in which how hierarchies of language have been analyzed, and there where the caste has completely entrenched the language? I think there also is it possible for us to look at it. Developing a common definition for looking at caste and understanding of different forms needs to be brought in. Looking at the role of institutions, we see whether it's we have seen how infrastructure is located. Now, can we have institutions which can audit the way in which casteism is functioning, so that it can be a social equity audit can be brought in, and a way in which the claims of the community for accessing infrastructure, and infrastructure is not just roads, it is not just civic amenities, it is access to the markets, it is access to the mandi, it is access to the post office, it is access to the common lands. No, so these I think are the very aspect that we will have to look at. Understanding how caste impacts not just on the Dalit community, I think we have not looked at how the caste functions on the dominant caste mindsets. Have we had a way in which decastifying can be looked at? Have we had a way in which we intricate how the discrimination follows? I think some of these we'll have to very strongly look at. In closing, I would like to say we have to really develop around 6 to 8 major aspects and develop another level of policy making that needs to go into. It's not enough to say that we reject Hindutva policies. Yes, of course, I think we need to lose, because that is where at some point the legitimization of the caste discrimination is still being accepted, and therefore we need to address, but it's not sufficient. We have to first analyze all corridors of power. Where is the institutional power to identity? How do we unpack the systems external to the community and create the internal realities many people experience daily? So, can we bring undoing casteism from analyzing the whole aspect of power, and power in terms of decision making, power in terms of access, power in terms of access to resources? How do we look at it? There is a clear aspect of strengthening the agency of these communities need to be handled. We need both from the Dalit communities as well as from the dominant communities a systemic program where we develop anti-caste leadership from each of these. So, can we have communities which are anti-caste, which play a very clear supportive and monitoring role to see how this is addressed in all spheres. Of course, we earlier said that we need to look at the gatekeepers. There are people who have come on the basis of reservation. There are people who are occupying because of their administrative services. There are people who are occupying. Now, we'll have to have an audit in terms of how effectively are they implementing. Is there a body, is there an index where we'll have to say very clearly that you will have to see that are you anti-caste or are you perpetuating caste? I think this has been done in the area of patriarchy, where there are people who are assessing whether you are pro and you are strengthening the gender rights. Similarly, I feel we'll have to look at the institutions and how they have been implementing the power as gatekeepers of those institutions. The whole manifestation of casteism, I think this is something that we have done. It's not only atrocities, it is not only reservation in politics. I think have we looked at health, we need to look at education, we look at employment, budget, access to services, access to justice, housing, labor markets. In all these areas, how do we capture the anti-caste elements, and therefore to take a way in which we can manifest the wherever there is a casteism in which we continue. And I think the fifth element we'll have to look at is we have to learn from the history. This challenging and reimagining India has also started way back in 1900s. If you look at Ayangali from Kerala, if you look at Sri Narayana Guru again from Kerala, you look at, of course, Baba Saheb has been an icon, but then you also look at several leaders like Kabir, Mahatma Phule, Savitribai Phule, Kanshiram, Bhagireddy Verma, Jagjeevan Ram, several of those leaders, they have left a historical legacy, and I think there is a need to reimagine and continuing to produce such mentors that we go on. Unfortunately, when you see there are no such citadels, there are no such institutions, places where a Dalit can say, I feel proud that I have contributed and my symbols are here. I think we need to create such symbols. We need to ensure that there is a greater accountability mechanisms that are built. I think the reimagining India is something that has to have clear accountability, grievance redressal mechanisms, and making sure that this gets, all the policies get implemented. Of course, networking, sometimes we bring leaders, but sometimes this leadership becomes isolated, leadership becomes only for themselves. How do we bring a collective leadership to be able to take this and wrench the deep-seated caste structures that are there in our mindset? And therefore, the last one, I think the culture is extremely important in everything. What is the culture of our attitudes? What is the culture of our expressions? Are there ways in which in everything that we do, we are able to bring in barabari, we are able to bring in equality, and then anti-hierarchical aspects that we do. I think looking at aspects internally and looking at aspect externally, bringing in a vision of the country where we can challenge these powers that continue to exclude. Of course, it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of pain, and we do need to speak truth to power when it cases, but I think in all these we'll have to see that we build a comprehensive ways in which we are accountable and we are holding others accountable for an egalitarian society in the way that we imagine India. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to share, and I think this is a tremendous effort that we need. We have talked about what our problems are. We have talked about what we don't want, but what do we want? What is the vision that we want? And I really commend Gauhar, even Shabnam, and all the team which are bringing out these tremendous bits from all angles to see that we root out the systems of hierarchy, the systems of casteism, the systems of patriarchy that have held to ransom our society. Jai Bhim.